And we're back. Welcome to Abstractable. I am Lockie and with me is Ryan. And the Abstractable podcast is for, I guess it's for people who are trying to make their mark on the world and kind of learning how to do that. And, you know, we certainly fit into that category. So today we're going to talk about, I guess, a reflection on the last 10 episodes. So episodes 11 to 20. And it's called the Abstract Chat number 2. And it's kind of a follow on from the first one we did.
Yeah. And so it is an opportunity for us to discuss what were the books or documentaries or whatever it is that we discussed in the last 10 episodes. Becomes a chance for us to really try and draw out the thematic elements and the key concepts and the things that have really stuck in our own minds. And then a few bits of housekeeping even at the end, just a chance for us to reflect on our podcasting journey and what this is so far. So if you want to jump in and join us for the story, then have a listen and we hopefully we'll be able to draw out a few nice thematic elements across all the episodes that we've done in the last 10. So don't forget, you can find full video from this episode on YouTube and check out our website, abstractable.co. We hope you enjoy.
And we are back. Hey, Ryan.
How's it going, Lockie?
Good, thanks. Good. You? I just asked.
Marvellous, mate.
I asked you twice. So, tell me, what are you reading? What are you reading at the moment?
It sounds like a loaded question, mate. It sounds like you already know the answer.
Well, we know that we both read a lot of books at the same time, so you could answer one of many things.
So funnily enough, I've just started listening to, it's called Mademoiselle Chanel, which is the story of Coco Chanel. And
wow, that's cool.
Yeah. I've probably been listening, well, I'm actually listening to it with Jazzy, but we're probably about a third of the way through and it's pretty incredible. It's an incredible story so far. And
how long's the audio?
It's probably 13 to 15 hours. So, which is that tends to be the sweet spot for a lot of biographies. I've noticed some like the Jordan doco, which was funnily enough one of the last 10 episodes. I think that was like 22 or 3 or 4 hours from memory.
Yeah,
that was a solid slog.
Yeah, that's decent. That's a long episode. I have just finished reading this.
How Innovation Works. Matt Ridley.
Yeah, excellent book.
Okay, what's the synopsis, Lockie?
Well, it's about how innovation works.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, so it's actually, look, I'm not going to give too much away because it's the topic of the first of our new type of episodes.
Aha, gotcha.
So I'll just leave that there and we might talk about that a bit more as we get a bit further into this episode.
A little hook left in the water, mate, dangling there.
That's it. So this is the Abstract Chat 2. So we did one at the end of the first 10 episodes are recorded, and we've kind of decided to do one every 10 episodes to kind of reflect on what we've kind of got from all the books and stuff we've read and what's happening with the podcast and what's happening with us.
Yeah, it's a little personal update, on the podcast. So expect to see them around every 10 episodes, and it's a chance for us to distill, hopefully, the things that are still resonating with us from the last 10 episodes, or what is kind of stayed in our minds across those last 10 episodes, and then also a bit of housekeeping.
Yeah,
towards the end.
Yeah, so that's it. So a little disclaimer: there's some crossover between what we talked about in the last episode, because the first Abstract Chat, we've kind of changed up the order of the releases a little bit in our kind of when we're starting up the podcast. So for example, we'll probably talk a little bit about Let My People Go Surfing, which was also talked about in the last episode. But you know what? We're not perfect, so get over it.
Yeah. And look, to be honest, I think Let My People Go Surfing deserves a mention in each.
That's
just because it was such a good book.
Exactly. So tell me, let's take that as a lead in. What has been your kind of favourite book or books from the last 10 episodes 11 through 20?
We've covered a fairly broad range of books, right? Reflecting on the last 10. And it's great to see there's been quite a few kind of biographical style narratives in there as well, which has been quite exciting because they've made for some really good stories. For me, though, I'm going to say, The War of Art tops it off in the last 10 episodes for me. And I think that was episode 11 from memory. And if not, I'm sure you'll correct me.
I'll just try and correct you right now as I look it up.
Yeah, fact check, Lockie. So War of Art for me, and we already said Let My People Go Surfing. That was a definite highlight in the last 10 episodes. And
episode 13, The War of Art was.
It's too off. So episode 13 was, I don't even know what episode 11 was, but those two books.
Range.
That's why I had episode 11 in my head, because my third book was Range. So
fantastic.
Which was also a book that we did touch on in Abstract Chat 1, but we want to fix up this out of syncness we've got. So they're both getting a mention for me in this episode.
That's it. So why did you pick those as opposed to, say, Jordan or Jiro or some of the latter ones such as Creativity Inc. or 22 Laws?
Yeah. These three all kind of sit on the same theme for me. And to be honest, I actually think there's a few other episodes in there that kind of sit in that space for me as well. For example, Jordan. Yeah, the Jordan episode was definitely one of those. And this is really about people sticking to their passions, or people finding their passions and placing that at the highest priority in what they were doing in their pursuit. So the War of Art was really about the journey of the artist, but the artist was a very broad term in the context of the book. You know, an artist being an entrepreneur, an artist being a painter, an artist being a musician, an artist being whatever it is that you want to get involved in. You know, heck, a software developer, I'm sure, would fit the bracket for artist in this one.
Something creative almost. It seemed to be some creative endeavor.
But arguably anything could be creative, mate. So you could look at like a physicist, a theoretical physicist. Those guys have to be pretty damn creative, don't they?
Yeah. I think
it's got
exactly. It's got a really broad application.
Yeah, and so that was really about the persisting journey of following that deep passion and finding. It was almost like listening to the gut and pursuing what the gut says, and then you see the kind of incarnation of that play out in Let My People Go Surfing with Yvon Chouinard, Mr. Founder of Patagonia, where all he wanted to do was go rock climbing. And that was that was his life. You know, and then he shortly after that goes on to, buy his own little anvil and forgery that he takes around in the back of his van just so that he can make pitons, which is the thing that you used to hammer into the cliff face, and use those to allow him to climb up the walls. But he did that so that he not only could he use them for himself, but so that he could sell them. And then shortly after, Cunard equipment was born out of that, which then essentially evolved into Patagonia, the famous clothing brand we know. And all he was doing was creating stuff that would allow him and his, both business colleagues / friends / outdoor ed buddies to pursue their passions for climbing and outdoor stuff.
Do what they love to do, yeah. There's certainly a trend on a few of these books about things that are just passions but are quite obscure at the time, becoming more mainstream over time. And because these guys have been there from the start but also are purists, they tend to be in a great position to kind of do what they love while actually running really successful businesses. So,
why do you think that is, mate? Like, what do you think that is?
What I think that is actually the growth of the economy. So I think it can be like viewed a bit from a macro thing where essentially, as economies get bigger, you get more specialized in what you do, but what you consume becomes a lot more broad. And this is something I've read. And so essentially people start to there's more people. And because they've got more disposable income, and they also are able to have more broad interests. So the thing that is kind of esoteric in 1950 becomes a bit more popular and a bit easier to spread, and becomes a kind of it doesn't mean everything will get popular, but it's kind of the same reason. I don't know. It seems to me to be sort of the same reason your house gets, or they're kind of connected. The reason that maybe your house goes up in value is a similar thing. It's just lots of people are around, and what was kind of a block in the back of Baldwin in 1940 you could purchase for $2,000 is now a very highly sought after piece of property because it's no longer the Wild West. So
the wild west of eastern Melbourne.
The Wild East.
The Wild East.
Yeah. Does that kind of make sense? That's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it does. I think maybe the economic growth definitely has something to do with it, because unless people have, I guess, the disposable income to go and do things like go rock climbing, or the disposable income not just to purchase the equipment to do it, but actually do something else other than working, for example. So, for example, to contrast that, I just mentioned that I was reading Mademoiselle Chanel, and not to spoil that, but she was working like 6 days a week, 13 plus hours a day. And then they would have just enough time on their Sunday day off to go back, visit their grandparents / parents. That sounds weird, but that was legit. And yeah, it's not as bad as what it sounds. And I'm not giving any more away. You just have to wait. And
that's a good teaser.
Yeah, nice. And so yeah, and then the Sunday they would basically spend traveling back to their home town and then eat a meal, basically because they weren't eating much during the week because they just couldn't afford to eat, and all their money was basically going to pay for the rent that they owed to the boss that they were renting their houses off, who was also paying them like a pittance to be working all these hours, and it was just this cycle. Yeah. And so as you've struck on, Lachie, the fact is less and less people are doing that nowadays, whereas there was definitely a time where that was commonplace. That was very, very commonplace.
Yeah. Yeah,
and so,
it's interesting. And that's not the upward mobility of that time was amazing, really, for during that period in the Western countries. And you could argue maybe you're seeing something similar in China at the moment. it is brutal on the people who are going through it. But the generation that comes after probably, is able to kind of, I guess, benefit from all the hard work of the previous generation.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a really interesting point. Just before that, so there's the economic bit, but I think there's also just the population side, the population growth and the technology side. So the population side, I think just by having more people, you have more potential to have, instead of having one person interested in a particular niche interest, you might have 30 people, and 30 people is enough to make a little club, and then we can get together on Thursdays and discuss, what our favorite. What's your clown? The psycho clown posse.
The insane clown posse.
Insane clown posse. So you can continue to do that, Lachie, on a Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, you can find your tribe.
You can find your tribe.
Easier.
And then with the advent of social media, you can now find your tribe on the other side of the world and have e-meetups, online meetups. So you're not constrained by geography like we used to be.
Yeah, because an idea or a technology or that, it spreads. So if part of the thing that's growing is the ability to spread things quickly, you're going to get a lot more movement. And then if there's more people to pick that thing up in the first place, then it's easier to ship and transport, and you kind of get this natural swell. But because you were there early, you get this kind of, and you're a hardcore person who really enjoys it, you're going to get this uplift as you go, and you're one of the best because you're just fanatical about it. And I think you see that over and over again. Like Shoe Dog is a great example of that, which I hope we do an episode on that soon. That running was like this really obscure thing.
That is so strange, isn't it? The fact that running was like it was almost like a weird thing to do. People that went running were weirdos.
Yeah. And then you've got, even you could argue basketball before Jordan was more obscure. Now it was already like had a nice little plateau, but you would say that, he changed almost everything about that game. And what seems to happen is once it reaches a certain, particularly if you get the cultural piece right, it bleeds over into things that have nothing to do with the initial purpose. Like Patagonia may be a good example of that. Nike was for runners, now it's for everything, and Jordan was a cultural icon, so.
Yeah. One of the real big case in points there was episode 5, which was Total Recall. Now we're kind of spreading beyond here, but Total Recall, weightlifting. Weightlifting was like almost taboo. It wasn't just for weirdos. It was like taboo to be a weightlifter for some reason. And
then
I think it has to do with like social conservativeness or something of that nature. And
maybe Dylan's an example of that too. Like.
Yeah, in the folk music. Is that episode 20? Does that scrape in?
That is episode 20, so we can count it.
Okay, great.
The other one. What about Jiro? Now, Jiro
is a case of this, like pursuing his passion for sure.
But how does he play into the growing swell? I guess perhaps he can charge a lot more than he used to, perhaps, but he didn't really scale because he didn't want to, I guess.
Well, with Jiro, he's subject to the exact same thing. So now you have like a cult following of people who go around the world just to dine at fancy restaurants, most of which have probably had an appearance on Chef's Table at some point in time. And the fact that
your average person on the other side of the world would have tasted sushi already, which perhaps wasn't the case back in the day, was it?
Yeah. It's not a strange thing. And so for you to now pass through a 7-Eleven or something and pick up a 6-pack of sushi, and then go, how can there be like a world-class version of this? Or what does a world-class version of this taste like? And, if you've got enough interests and enough, cash to get you over to Japan, then you can go do that. And in fact, now you actually need more than that, because to get into Jiro's restaurant, you need to be in the know, be in the clique. So he's like added another layer of, it's a good marketing ploy, another layer of tension on top. It's harder for people to get inside.
I would say that one of my favourite books out of the last 20 was Daring Greatly. Now, that was episode 10, so it doesn't quite count, but because we didn't talk about it in the last episode, I don't want it to get lost in the gaps because I enjoyed it so much. I think that all the people we're talking about kind of dared greatly to follow what they really cared about, didn't they? And worried more about what was right for them. I get the feeling even if they weren't successful, they would have been pretty content anyway. I sort of got that feeling with a few of them, except Jordan. He doesn't count.
He's a separate case, I think. Jordan,
the exception that proves the rule, perhaps. But yeah, I too loved The War of Art, and I really got lost in the Rolling Thunder review, the Bob Dylan episode 20. That was something. I watched it on a plane. I think I say this in the episode. And when I watch things on the plane, I'm in this weird kind of headspace where I'm a bit more like
you're in the twilight zone. You're not sure if you're awake or asleep.
Yeah, so watching something like that's got like fictional elements and stuff to it, which I didn't really realize until after I'd watched it and you told me. It's like a real freaky ride. Yeah, he is. So I guess it kind of pushes us into what are our takeaways from the last 20 episodes. And we've already strung a few things together because I guess to give some context, we really want to kind of bring the ideas from these different things that we read and enjoy and kind of find out how they kind of fit together and what the similarities are, what are the patterns, what fits, what doesn't, and create that kind of mental network.
Yeah, I think, because it's in their own right, each of these books, at least for us, has a big impact. And the reason we're doing an episode on them is because we enjoyed it so much and thought there was some great ideas in it. And that
not every book makes the episode list. No,
unfortunately not. Maybe fortunately for us, because I just couldn't keep up with the recount. But so to do the book itself is, it gleans enough, some great ideas, but to like look across all the books thematically, I think you can pull some really exciting things together. And so that's what we hope to do in doing this, is that maybe every 10 episodes, for the people that are interested, there might be some themes that will draw out to kind of almost be a summary of what went on from an idea perspective in the last 10 episodes. So you mentioned Daring Greatly, Lockie, and whilst, yes, I agree with you that, all these people were daring greatly, I think there's more in Daring Greatly than just, pursuing your passion. And I suspect there's probably more in Daring Greatly as to what resonated with you than just, doing that. Can you talk more about Daring Greatly?
Yeah, so I think that, I guess it kind of talked about, the different elements of vulnerability, shame, and how those interplay and kind of affect how you live your life, I think, and how you feel about yourself and how you process that kind of feedback. So to my mind, it kind of allowed me to think a bit more about, I kind of put as like pushing yourself kindly. And I think that this really plays into what Stephen Pressfield talks about in The War of Art, and one of the big things about some of the other people we've talked about and other ideas is that you need to kind of push yourself. You need to be kind of kind to yourself and just be happy with the fact that you're doing the work. And it'll kind of there is an illusion that you get when you read these books and watch these movies and things that it all kind of happens in this neat little one, it feels like a 1 hour packet or something where all these things happened and, it just kind of all worked out. But the truth is that that we're talking about people's careers and lives over 40, 50 years.
We love a good fairy tale.
Yeah, so it's a really slow churning process for me, I've probably got a bit more perspective after the last 10 episodes or so about how to kind of just show up and do what you enjoy doing and do it as best as you can. And that's enough. That's the success, and let the rest take care of itself.
I think the key word there was enough. I think one of the big things in the book she says is, I am enough? Is that one of her? She says that's a nice little mantra to say to yourself. And it's not like I am enough, so I'm not going to do anything. It's I have been enough. I've given my best foot forward, or I've lent into this situation.
Yeah, probably the second thing that I noticed throughout all the books was just how much I wrote down for this episode that creativity is a team sport as a kind of idea. But then I kind of feel like I might change that to kind of everything is. Like it seems to me that in all these, Creativity is such a great book that we haven't touched on a lot yet, but you look at that and you look at the Dylan's tour, but then even if you think about Jordan and Jiro and even some of the stuff that's talked about in Range and in Daring Greatly, is that it all happens in a collective, and the best most enjoyable work happens with others sharing that journey, but also the best results as well. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, we are better off together. None of these, because we have discussed like some really I guess pedestal people in these last 10 episodes. None of these people have done this by themselves. And if it wasn't for the amount of collaboration that they had with others. So for example, in Range, we spoke about Charles Darwin, and he had like 50 pen pals that he would write letters to all the time. And, and if it wasn't for him having all those pen pals, it's unlikely that he would have come up with, his theory on natural selection. So even, this has been a consistent theme, not just in our connected age, but for all time. Yeah.
So what about you? I think one of the things you were talking to me about before the episode, before we were on air, was just how much passion everyone has in this. That we've seemed to have found people in the last 10 episodes that are really passionate about what they do.
Yeah, well, I kind of touched on the fact that a few minutes ago, just about how they were pursuing their passion, but kind of digging into that, it's because it's almost like for them, everything else follows on from the passion. And they, using the perspective of, say, Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art, he was writing for 20 years or something before he even sold his first bit of writing. And he was writing like every day for 20 years or so. Like that's a dedication to the craft. And he does talk about, the idea of the artist versus the professional, and how you want to actually be the professional, not the kind of aloof amateur, which, and what he means is basically show up every day. But he was showing up every day for the thing that he wanted to do every day. And the only reason he was able to do that for 20 years is because he had so much energy behind him to do that for the 20 years. So
it's an extreme example. Like, do you think as career advice, follow your passion is good advice?
I think so. Now, it's not to say that you find the most niche thing that kind of impassions you, but I think if you steer yourself in the direction towards the things that resonate more with you, there's things that that just can't stand doing that other people love doing. For example, I'm trying to pluck something out. Like I'm not a fan of writing letters. I don't know. Whereas I'm sure there's people that love to write letters, and so that's if that's the case, then I'm less inclined to go into a job where I have to write letters versus someone who really enjoys writing letters might find themselves a career path that's more aligned with that. There's people that might be passionate about environmental things. And so, if you can steer yourself towards it, not even necessarily like, if you haven't got the opportunity to jump into an organization that is purely about environmental good, then maybe it's an organization that sees that as a core value. And then you can kind of champion something internally, So it's like steering in the direction of, and because it becomes like a stepping stone. And I think but to like jump off the cliff and completely cut everything else off and kind of dive into it, which is have you seen the documentary on Van Gogh?
No.
Yeah. Like that's intense. It felt very intense. He was just, he was
like an intense guy.
Yeah. He's a very intense guy. But he was doing nothing but his craft for no care for, the realities of, kind of the world around him. It was all for the pursuit of that passion. Now, if that's what you want to do, I think that's fine. But, if you need to, like, I guess, so he wasn't able to support a family, for example. So if you want to have a family, then you need to be able to support a family. And so you can't be living on, a couple of bits of bread and some cheese, maybe, or whatever he was doing to get himself by. So yeah, it depends on the kind of the life you wanted to lead. But I think the fact is, if you are obsessed with, say, building things, then move into something that's more aligned with, say, construction or architecture or something in the physical world. And so I think use it as a compass.
Yeah, I think that's quite sound. I think the idea of follow your passion just said like that is quite, like, it's simplistic. It's too simplistic. So it's got elements of truth to it, but it doesn't quite, it wouldn't be good advice on its own, It's not super pragmatic. It's a bit idealistic. But
and
like Stephen Pressfield's an extreme example probably, but also he worked a bunch of other jobs to get him in the position to do what he loved. So it's not like he quit everything and said, look, I'm just going to sit around writing until this happens and starve to death, I agree. Yeah, I think you've kind of summarized that quite well, but there's something in it, but you've got to be content with the outcomes that you're likely to get from what you do as well. So.
Yeah, and because
sometimes it's okay to have a hobby too. Like, it doesn't have to be a job. Sometimes it can ruin things,
Totally. I think there's something that gets spoken about a lot, which is like, it's actually this was definitely in Shoe Dog, which we haven't discussed yet, but it was, know when to quit. And it's not, and that might sound a little bit kind of, like you're giving yourself an excuse, but the way it gets framed in Shoe Dog, it's absolutely not about, just when things get hard, because I guess what you go through when you listen to the story of Nike is anything but easy. I think they had plenty of opportunities to can it.
Yeah, so that's a really good myth-breaking story, that one, and I'm looking forward to talking about it on one of our upcoming episodes.
The one thing Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
mate.
Have you got some last comments before we move on?
Yeah, just the other thing to bear in mind though is if you've got the person, if you're side by side with, I use the example of letter writing. I don't even know where that came from, but let's keep going with it. If you've got the person that loves to write letters and just that's what gets them up in the morning, gets them going, versus the person who just can't stand writing letters. Even if, across a period of time, even if that benefit that the person gets for the extra energy and passion that they have is 5%, it's definitely not 5%. Like, it's a lot more than 5%, but let's say it's 5%. That compounds across years. And so, if you've been in a job of letter writing for 5 years and absolutely love it versus someone who doesn't, you're going to be paying compounded dividends in terms of both your fulfillment and in terms of what you're able to do with it, where you're able to take it.
It's a great way of thinking about it, again, across that period of time. So I guess when we've travelled down that path at the end, we're probably starting those journeys for ourselves. We'll know what the real answer is.
That's it, mate.
So let's talk a bit about the podcast to kind of round out this episode. So how have you found it? I mean, let's kind of
bit of housekeeping
more generally.
I like it.
It's and also it's a bit of a reflection, isn't it? So,
well, okay, so we just had a look at some of the stats. So we officially kicked off now. It would have been almost 4 months. We're coming up to four, probably 3.5, just over 3.5 months.
Sounds about right.
In when we're recording this, and it's been a really exciting journey, mate. We've ventured into some great territory. It's been to be honest, like, overwhelming some of the just really nice feedback we've had of people enjoying it. People
are really lovely, aren't they?
Yeah.
We really appreciate the support that people have given a couple of engineers trying to record a podcast. It's much appreciated.
Yeah. And it's very much a learning process. So I think we've learnt a lot about not just the recording side of things, but I am no social media guru, and I'm still no social media guru, but I know a lot more than what I did when I started this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive learning curve, and even just learning to talk to each other and trying to get better at bringing good insights and interesting listening to people has been, I hope that we're getting better as we go. I'm sure we will be better on the 100th episode than we are on the 20th.
I hope we are.
But it's kind of fun trying new things and learning what works. I think we've obviously had to transition to record remotely because you now live in France. So that was interesting to try, and we were just kind of getting in a really nice groove face to face. And then we kind of had to reset and kind of figure out how to do this from afar.
It is strange just how different of an experience it is being in person to not being in person. And you get this, like, most people have had had a conversation over Zoom, over a video conference or something, and it just doesn't feel quite the same. But when because we're dealing with the other side of the world, there's like this weird delay, and it's just enough delay to make things awkward. So that's been that's been the real kind of sticking point for trying to work through it. But it's been exciting. Like,
if you're hearing some weird silences, that's why.
Yeah. I'm not just shaking my head in disappointment at Lockie's last comment.
So I guess we had a little go at the live stuff. Didn't really feel that good, so we kind of stopped that. And we've got a new idea that we're kind of playing with, where we're going to do some different types of YouTube clips, probably 10 to 15 minutes long, that talk about where one of us has read something and wants to explain the idea of the book to the other person visually on a Miro board, an Miro board, if you want to Google that, and have us sort of talking in the corner. And so we're kind of excited about that because it's a little bit of something that we thought was really fun idea, and it kind of mirrors a lot of the conversations we have where we'll talk about, oh, geez, I've read this. Do you want to have a listen to this or check out this idea? And we'll kind of quiz each other on it. And that kind of visual representation of it too is kind of a bit of new ground for us to give it a shot.
Yeah, I think so it's like a digital whiteboarding session. That's basically. And it's almost like one of us is giving a lecture to the other one, except the lecturer is probably going to get a little bit of devil's advocate played on him, I suspect.
A lot more heckling than a normal lecture.
I hope so. And although I have been in some uni lectures and there's plenty of heckling. So hopefully, yeah. And because the reason is we get to cover like such a wide variety of ideas, but there's some that don't maybe get explained super well, or just get kind of gleaned over. And there's some really, really great ideas. So we thought it'd be a nice opportunity to give a little bit of a visual explanation. And then, who knows, sometime down the future, we might be able to do in-person versions of this. And it'd be like a real lecture that way.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
So how's your relationship with Instagram going, Lachie?
Don't like Instagram. I'm not a big fan of it, though we're posting stuff on it. I don't think we've really figured out how it works.
No.
Just full stop. But then I also don't think we've quite figured out how to best communicate our work through it, because we really rely on these kind of long-form winding conversations where we kind of meander through ideas and that platform, it's hard to kind of communicate that style of thinking there, but we're working on it, and we'll keep going. But I think maybe YouTube's and obviously the audio podcast is where we first started, but we really find that the videos on YouTube are getting quite a bit of traction as well. And I think they really kind of bring, particularly the ones where we're there together, kind of that feeling of what it's like to be just hanging out. So
yeah, I think across the board, mate, if we made an estimate, there's maybe like 100 to 150 listens or views or bits of consumption of our content, probably even a little bit more than that each week. And so that's maybe like a figure we can come back to. That's like the collective of Instagram, YouTube, and all the various podcast outlets. So that's something we can
I reckon it's more than that. I reckon it's probably more like 250.
Okay.
When you add those together.
Yeah, I guess if you bring the Instagram in, it's probably, yeah. All right.
Because we're releasing those videos. Let's call it 200.
All right. So 200 a week.
Yeah, but it was interesting. Like we got kind of 7 hours of watch time on YouTube last week. So people are kind of starting to have a look, which is really quite a nice feeling. So anyhow, just to kind of wrap up, I mean, we'd love any feedback that anyone can give us is much appreciated, to tell us where we're going right, going wrong, anything you want more or less of. Please hit us up, probably on Instagram is the best, or in comment sections of YouTube and that sort of thing. Might be a good spot. We probably need to get an email, Ryan. But
we do have an email.
Do we? All right, we'll throw it out there.
podcast@abstractable.co.
Clearly, I don't check it, so you'll be talking to Ryan if you send something in.
It's all right, mate. We'll get you hooked up with an email.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's look. To be honest, anywhere, wherever's easiest. Yeah. Hit us up. If you enjoyed this episode too, like where we've touched on the various ideas and the thematic elements from all the various episodes, and really interested to hear that feedback too. So, or if there's a particular type of episode, like do you prefer the biographical episodes or the other ones? And we thoroughly enjoyed talking about all of them. So
yeah.
And don't forget, obviously this will be on YouTube as well if you're only listening to this. That's something we're probably not saying enough of.
Yeah, and probably the other thing we'd say is that if you like it, tell someone about it. That'd be awesome. So, or even don't even bother telling them about us. Just tell them about the book so they read it. But if you want to tell them about us too, that'd be great. But the idea of this is not so we can get 1 million people listening to it. It's about kind of getting some cool ideas out into the world of the stuff we really love. So, but a little shout out to us at help too. We like that. That might be a nice place to leave it, mate.
Yeah, I think we've covered enough. There's enough housekeeping there. There's enough self-proclamation at the end. So let's give it a wrap.
Let's call it. See you next time.
See you, mate.